But first, a story you will see nowhere else this morning. It's about one of the biggest crises we face, climate change, and a media war over that crisis. Climate deniers, people who believe climate change is not happening in any meaningful way, are sometimes painted in the media as fringe characters, as kooks. So this might shock you. A man who co-founded the Weather Channel thinks climate change is a hoax. His name is John Coleman. Before launching the Weather Channel in the early 1980s, he was the original weatherman on Good Morning America. And after launching the channel, he was also a local weatherman in New York, Chicago, and San Diego. Now he's retired, but his recent open letter saying that climate change is, quote, not valid, got a lot of attention and landed him in prime time on Fox News. So what did the Weather Channel do? It very publicly disavowed him. After all, for those who believe that the climate is changing and fast, this is a life and death matter. I've said before here on Reliable Sources that I don't think there are two equal sides to climate change. The scientific consensus is that it's real. The debate is over what to do about it. And the press has to be careful about creating this notion of sides. But Coleman's platform as a co-founder of a channel dedicated to weather is unique, and so is the channel's declaration that it believes climate change is happening. So this morning, both players are here, Coleman and the CEO of the Weather Channel, David Kenny. First, let me bring in John Coleman. He's in San Diego this morning. Thank you for being here.
It's nice to be on CNN. Hello to all your viewers. I resent you calling me a denier. That is a word meant to put me down. I'm a skeptic about climate change, and I want to make it darn clear, Mr. Kenny's not a scientist. I am. He's the CEO of the Weather Channel now. I was the founder of the Weather Channel, not the co-founder.
And I'm glad you did, because I am addicted to the Weather Channel. I watch a lot of cable news.
Now, hold on just a minute. I'm not done. And CNN has taken a very strong position on global warming that it is a consensus. Well, there is no consensus in science. Science isn't a vote. Science is about facts. And if you get down to the hard, cold facts, there's no question about it. Climate change is not happening. There is no significant man-made global warming now. There hasn't been any in the past, and there's no reason to expect any in the future. There's a whole lot of baloney, and yes, it has become a big political point of the Democratic Party and part of their platform, and I regret it's become political instead of scientific, but the science is on my side.
I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion about the topic right here. What I do wonder, though, is when you see
because you wouldn't allow it to happen on CNN. But I'm happy that I got on the air and got a chance to talk to your viewers. Hello, everybody. There is no global warming.
What I do wonder is when you see the government, when you see NASA, when you see other institutions say that 97% of climate scientists agree, do you think they're making it up? What I don't understand is how you square that.
That's a manipulated figure, and let me explain it to you. The government puts out about $2.5 billion directly for climate research every year. It only gives that money to scientists who will produce scientific results that support the global warming hypothesis of the Democrat Party position. So they don't have any choice. If you're going to get the money, you got to support their position. Therefore, 97% of the scientific reports published support global warming. Why? Because those are the ones the government pays for, and that's where the money is. It's real simple, but that doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't make it true. That only makes it bought and paid for. The money goes in circles.
I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to try to refute you on the facts.
That's the truth.
I'll simply say that the vast majority...
Please stand back from this issue and let the two sides be on the air. There are 31,000 scientists who have signed a petition that says it is not valid, that my position is correct. And we'll keep battling, and we will prevail in time, but I don't know if we'll do it in my lifetime.
I do hope viewers are Googling the data you're sharing, because I do think it's skewed. I have to say that. I want to ask you about the weather.
No, it's not true, and I hope you will go to the websites that present the papers that show that none of this alarmism about ice and heat waves and droughts, none of it is happening.
Is the Weather Channel part of the conspiracy?
Well, the Weather Channel has bought into it. As I say it, they've drunk the Kool-Aid. But so is all the media. That's no big surprise.
Let me read to you what the channel said this week, because after you appeared on Fox...
Weather Channel statement.
Well, let me read it to the viewers then. After you appeared on Fox, they did put out this statement distancing themselves from you. They said, Mr. Coleman does have a place in our company's history, and we appreciate the contributions that he made more than 30 years ago. However, we want to be clear, John Coleman is no longer affiliated with our company. How did you feel to see them disavow you in that way?
Well, no problem. I mean, you know, that's all accurate. And the statement that's on their website, which they reissued this week, was written back in 2007. And that's a rather reasonable, warmist statement. It's not full of alarmism. It's not full of the sky is falling. It's a pretty reasonable statement. It's not the programming they put on the TV that's not reasonable. And you know, when they put on their climate geeks, those aren't scientists. Those are nuts.
You sound like a man disappointed.
They never put on a real skeptical scientist. They don't give us any spot on their channel. That's too bad that they don't. You
sound like a man disappointed by the channel that you helped create.
Oh, I'm terribly disappointed. I created a channel to give people their weather, tell them what the weather is now and what it's going to be where they live and in their region, and keep them posted on the weather and serve a real purpose. And that channel has been totally distorted and become strange as it can be.
Well, John, thank you for being here this morning and sharing your views with us.
Well, I thank you for letting me on CNN. I had my say, and it was great fun.
Global warming is the latest in a long, almost never-ending series of crusades. I've forgotten how many millions of dollars he's made out of this. The first column I ever wrote more than 30 years ago was titled "The Prophets of Doom," P-R-O-F-I-T-S, of doom. And so it's the same phenomenon today. I mean, there is money in this stuff. You have to pretend to be certain, because otherwise you'll get no support for what you're doing. I mean, you go around saying, well, I think there'll be global warming. Well, there's no money in that. I mean, there's no votes in that. I mean, what you know, I just talked to God, and he told me that it's going to be global warming. Now, let's set up a multi-billion-dollar program to stop it. So many places where they've had record low temperatures. They had snow in Houston, the earliest they've ever had. The last record for something like this was like 5 inches. They got 20 inches. I mean, and what used to amuse me a lot in recent years is when they schedule a global warming conference and they have to cancel it because of the cold. You know, I mean, it just doesn't make a dent. Imagine if you're an assistant professor in meteorology or climatology, and you think that global warming is a crock, and the full professors who are going to vote on your tenure and whatnot are getting millions of dollars in grants. I mean, how eager are you going to be to burst into print and saying it's all nonsense?
Sometime in the next week, Parliament will vote on probably the greatest tax change in your life. Is the carbon dioxide tax, to make us cut the gases we're told are heating the world dangerously. It's a tax on coal-fired electricity that will raise billions of dollars a year and probably cost thousands of jobs. That's a huge call. So, to see if it makes sense, we're going to do exactly what Julia Gillard has told us to do.
Addressing climate change all starts with the science. The government accepts the science.
We are going to start with the science, and we've asked prominent Australian scientists to help explain it for us in an extended panel session on the 4 big questions about global warming. Emeritus Professor Garth Paltridge was a chief research scientist with the CSIRO Division of Atmospheric Research. Peter Ridd is Professor of Marine Physics at James Cook University, and his research has included monitoring coral reefs. Professor Bob Carter of James Cook University is a marine geologist and co-editor of the just-published non-governmental panel on climate change interim report. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. The first question is, are humans warming the planet? And is Julia Gillard right?
Our climate is changing. This is caused by carbon pollution.
Bob, climate changing? Caused by humans?
Yes, of course. And the difficulty here is the unspoken words. Climate always changes. That's the missing agenda. And every climate scientist knows this. Nothing unusual about climate change. The idea that somehow climate was stable until the Industrial Revolution and our carbon dioxide emissions is simply silly. But in saying climate is changing and we will accept the science, the Prime Minister is agreeing with you, agreeing with us. We all accept the science, but which science. And the issue is, to what degree are human carbon dioxide emissions making extra changes to climate on top of the natural changes? That's the key question.
Garth, it seems to me that she's saying, and the change is caused by carbon pollution, she's saying it's all done by humans.
Well, that's pushing things rather too far. I mean, the short answer to the question as to whether carbon dioxide is going to increase the temperature of the world, the short answer and the misleading answer is yes. The trouble is that you are really concerned with how much change is going to take place. And the scientists these days, the climate scientists, tend to vastly overstate the problems of an increasing temperature of the world due to carbon dioxide pollution.
And I'm going to have a look at some of those other predictions they make about that. Peter, what also struck me is the use of the word pollution, carbon pollution. Can you tell us, are we talking carbon pollution? Are we talking carbon dioxide? Is carbon dioxide a pollutant?
Well, I mean, it's a natural gas, and it's important. It's in fact essential to plants. So it's actually stretching it a little bit to say it's pollution. But I guess if you do really believe that we're going to, you know, really cook up, then perhaps you could regard it as a correct usage of the term. But it is a bit stretching it, and sometimes you wonder whether it's been used as a sort of a media thing more than using it as a fact.
Yeah. Well, look, because I've just looked up the latest satellite data on my iPad of warming over the last 30 years, and it's about, as you can see, about a third of a degree. Is that really a big warming? Can Julia Gillard say that's caused by our gases?
No, I don't think there's any way we can do that. I mean, essentially all this boils down to looking at these big models that predict the climate, and when you look at the details, the uncertainties involved in those make it, in my view, that in fact they have no predictive value whatsoever, in fact.
All right, so when we're told that our climate is changing and this is caused by carbon pollution, the answer from scientists is, well, it's changing, but it always changes, and what warming we've seen, we're not sure that carbon pollution is the main driver of it, and pollution might be a loaded word. All right, so to question 2, is any warming dangerous? Now, again, I want to ask you, is Julia Gillard right?
We'll see more bushfires and drought. We'll see agricultural land in the Murray-Darling Basin no longer able to be used for agriculture. We'll see icons like the Great Barrier Reef threatened and Kakadu.
Peter, are we going to see all these disasters? Is the science telling us that all these disasters, bushfires, droughts, Great Barrier Reef, true?
Well, Great Barrier Reef, it's really strange, you know, because all the corals that live on the Great Barrier Reef already live in New Guinea, where the temperature is at least 1 or 2 degrees hotter. And in fact, they live in the Great Barrier Reef. In the Papua New Guinea, they grow faster and they're possibly more healthy as well. If there are temperature-stressed corals in Queensland, they're in Moreton Bay because it's too cold. Corals like it hot, essentially. In addition to that, it's also not well known that in fact the sea level has fallen on the Great Barrier Reef in the last 5,000 years, and this has killed a lot of the corals because they're now exposed at low tide. If in addition to global warming we get a sea level rise, as is the prediction, there'll be a massive explosion of corals on these areas that are now actually dead.
Are you telling me we're going to get more corals?
I don't think there's any doubt we'll have more corals.
Peter, you must be wrong, because I have consulted Ulf Goldberg and the alarmist David Suzuki, and have a look what they say. They say there's been a devastating effect so far from warming on the reef already.
At the moment, there's probably little doubt that this is our first major sign of a change in the tropics because of global warming.
I was shocked. I mean, in that short time from '88 to 2004, there are very, very perceptible changes.
Bob, Peter says he's not convinced about the corals. He's not seeing it. What about the rising sea levels and all that kind of stuff?
I find it hard to keep a straight face watching David Suzuki and Professor Goldberg say those things. There's absolutely no doubt what Peter has said is right. Corals grow up and they are controlled by the shallow water ones to average sea level. If average sea level is rising, and it is at the moment on the Queensland coast, and it will continue to do so, that is good for the Great Barrier Reef. If, and it's a very big if, and I don't think it'll happen, but if human warming was enough that it accentuated that sea level rise, then the corals would do even better. Score 100 Peter Reid, 0 David Suzuki.
Is not doing very well here, so I'm going to ask question 3 of Garth. And again, the question this time, question 3 is the science settled? And again, is Julia Gillard right? When she says only a few mad conservative journalists, I wonder who she's talking about, disagree with the global warming scientists.
I ask, who would I rather have on my side? Alan Jones, Piers Ackerman and Andrew Bolt, or the CSIRO, the Australian Academy of Science, the Bureau of Meteorology, NASA, the US National Atmospheric Administration and every reputable climate scientist in the world.
Garth, you work with the CSIRO, and she says all these institutions are against a few crazies like me.
Yes, well, that's, again, rather overstating the case. I mean, there are vast quantities of scientists who at least question the concept of man-made global warming. It is true that the ones that go public are usually scientists either who have retired or who come from other disciplines.
Nothing to lose.
They've got nothing to lose. But in this day and age, it can be fairly dangerous to one's career if you are a climate scientist and express some vociferous objection to the concept of dangerous global warming.
Well, in fact, I thought you made an interesting point, Peter, because you sent a letter to the chief scientist, Ian Chubb, saying, why don't you ensure that funding goes to sceptics as it goes to warmers who get billions?
Yes, I think this is very important because, you know, in our court system we have a prosecution, we have a defence, and by making the two sides argue, we can get to the truth, hopefully. And the defence side in a court case, actually, their sole job is to try to find problems with the opposition argument. Now, in science at the moment, we only hear one side, and one side is funded. The other side is not funded. So we have a situation where, in fact, it's like a court case in China, and therefore the public actually can't have a great deal of faith in science at the moment. We need scientific reform, in fact, before we go and do things to our economy.
Right, I think that contributes to the groupthink, but let's go to question 4 because we're running out of time. Will Julia Gillard's tax actually work? By how much will the carbon dioxide tax cut the world's temperature? Or is Gillard right when she says that is an impossible question?
To what extent will the carbon tax reduce average global temperatures?
Well, this is a question that first put into the public debate, I believe, by Andrew Bolt, and it's a question not capable of answer because it assumes other countries aren't acting.
True or false? Is that a question incapable of answer, Bob?
Well, you have to use a computer model to answer it, and so it's a highly inaccurate answer. But any computer model, and there are different estimates, you end up with fractions of 10,000ths of a degree of warming averted for a 5% cut in Australia.
In Australia, because we've actually asked or got from 3 scientists some estimates of what the temperature would be. They range from about 4,000th of a degree if we went through and cut to 1/20,000th of a degree. Would you quarrel with those estimates, Garth?
No, they're in the ballpark, but because we're relying on models, we can't be exact on it, but roughly.
Essentially zero, Peter?
Yes, essentially zero. However, I mean, one of the arguments is that by cutting our own, then we have some sort of moral high ground to pretend that the Chinese and the Indians are going to cut theirs. I think that's the argument that they're using, in fact.
Well, gee, it doesn't seem to have gone too well for Julia Gillard. The scientists tell if they listen to them, a lot of what she claims is the basic facts about the global